Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, however you're watching, wherever you're watching, however you're listening, wherever you're listening. It's the Bet Online Salute to Troy podcast, and we have 2/3 of the tripod here. We're here with the one and only self, the mad scientist, the madman. Madman, how are you doing today?
Doing well, Coach. Always a pleasure to do this with you on a Monday evening. Obviously, we're about 48 hours removed from the Maryland sting. I think it's still stinging, but excited to have a great conversation with you, as always, about all things our beloved men of Troy.
It doesn't sting me. It doesn't, because I called it when we did our preview show. I was like, it's more of the same. Like we're right now on the verge of insanity. We are doing the same thing, expecting different results, and like we're on the verge of insanity right now. I'm at the point right now to where I understand what it is. You know where I stand. Like I'm past the PIP. I'm past the performance improvement plan. I think it's time to make a change. And I do understand right now is not a good time to make a change. I know it does not make sense fiscally, and it's not a feasible solution. I get that part. But we do need to make a change. We do need to somehow make a change. But I want to address some things. Football Scoop dropped an article, and we talked about it. I showed you the article before we did this day. And they were talking – it was from Lincoln Riley's presser. And I didn't watch his presser. I never really watch his pressers because he says things and it just irritates me. So I kind of just not watch them. But there's some quotes in here. And he says that one of the quotes is he opened up the pros gate comments with, and once again, I got this from footballscoop.com. Heartbreaking way to end it. I don't know. It's been kind of the tale the last few weeks. Do some good things, get the lead, and obviously not able to finish. Not able to finish these games. This one was sympathetic. One of these three, all three of these sides had opportunities. Lincoln Riley has a sports psychology problem. No, seriously. He has a sports psychology problem. He has an idea, but he's not in tune with the reality of what's going on in the real world. And he says things like this. All three sides had an opportunity. It's a tough finish. He goes on and says, we just haven't done enough. These last 4 games have been tough, and this and that. And if you go on and read the article, at the end of the article, and I love this, at the end of the article, it says, or it might have been the other one I sent you, Jamal, but at the end of that other article, it says, Lincoln Riley better figure it out, or SC will figure it out for him. You know what I mean? Like, that's the best comment, but it's like, the thing I learned from Coach Carroll, the very first thing they teach you as a freshman with Coach Carroll is finish. Finish. Strength coaches are on you about finishing. Preach finish. The very first shirt that they give you as a freshman is a shirt that says finish. Everything is about finish. He has this whole thing. Can you win the game in the first quarter? No. Second quarter? No. Third quarter? No. Can you win in the fourth quarter? Then we all go crazy because we want to finish the game. There's a finishing problem. He's not addressing the finishing problem. He's just like, he can't figure it out. And we've talked about this. We've talked about this multiple times. Like, he has like this delusional reality. We're one play away. Only if we got that one play, we could win. That's not how you go about it. You go about it like, this is the one play where we made a mistake. How do we fix it so we don't do this again? Right? How do we make corrections? I'm not sure. Well, today's Monday and they practice today. So they do practice on Mondays, which I'm all for college football. Practice Monday all the way through because I feel like you lose a day if you get Mondays off. But he's not there completely in a sports psychology sense of matter. He's not understanding that he's the problem. He's not fixing the problem. And then he goes and tells these guys like, oh, we're one play away. Now we're 3 plays away. Now we're 4 plays away. you're always going to be a play away if you don't fix the play. And he's not fixing the play. You know what I mean? Like now you're in a situation where you're below 500. You're fighting, like you said yesterday, we're fighting to go to a bowl game. You know what I mean? We got believe it or not, we have a tough stretch, right? Rutgers is going to be pissed off. They got a great coach with Greg Schiano. We'll talk about that later. And they're a tough New Jersey football team. When you think of New Jersey, you think of Rutgers, right? I just don't understand why somebody hasn't helped him with this situation. I think this is the thing that will get him over the edge, but he just doesn't get it. And he's still preaching the same stuff. And that's why we keep getting the same results. And I figured this out. Penn State, it's more the same. I'm not surprised now. Oh, we lost to Rutgers on a Friday. It is what it is. Like, I know what's going to happen because I know it's being told to them, and it's not good enough for them to get over the edge. And I don't know how they fix that because he's a stubborn man and he needs to fix it. How do you feel about what I said, man?
Yeah, Coach. I mean, it's a really good point, and want to sort of double click on one thing in particular that you said, and that's the kind of the delusional reality, right? Because you can live in this alternate world where you're always one play away. You're always, you can live in this almost world forever. And there's sort of a safety and a security in that of recognizing, hey, we were so close, but we weren't there. That makes it a very sort of unique situation. There's a fine line. There's a very delicate balance between optimism and fantasy. And that's a tough line sometimes for coaches, for entrepreneurs, for leaders to play. And it's interesting, Coach, because the one play away philosophy, he's not, here's where it's so dangerous, because he's not like factually incorrect. Like if you say like factually, it's like, yeah, okay, the 4 losses were by 14 points. You had fourth quarter leads in all 4 games and you sort of wilted away. So in that regard, you're like, yeah, we're close. But here's the danger, Coach. Here's why it's so dangerous to have this one play away philosophy. And I've called it a double-edged Trojan sword. It's the double-edged sword here because it can go the other way. And I have an article coming out on LAFBnetwork.com tomorrow on this, but you can play that game both ways. And just in the same ilk, as you can say, Lincoln Riley is 4 plays away from being 7-0 from 2022 till 2024 up until now. It's 22-12 record. He's 6 plays away from being 16-18 at USC. He's 6 plays away from being under 500 at USC. And I can give you the plays right now, Coach, off the top of my head. Go back in 2022, that Oregon State game, right? That first tough game in Corvallis. Caleb 3-0, we're number 7 in the country, down 14-10 that whole second half. And everyone remembers that sort of Caleb to Jordan Addison 21-yard touchdown pass with a minute to go. We get out of there 17-14. Everyone forgets on that drive with 3 minutes to go. There was a 4th and 6, Coach, if you recall. And Caleb scrambles. He's a yard short. Brett Nealon comes into the pile and just shoves him over the line. If Brett Nealon doesn't come in and shove him over the line, we get stopped. Oregon State runs out the clock. Game over. That's a loss. Second play. We know it from the Victory Bell, the electric Victory Bell game of 2022. Nobody could get a stop in that game the whole second half. Latu sacks Caleb. Finally, there's one stop in this game. 2 minutes to go. UCLA's got the ball down 48-45. The whole stadium, SC fans, UCLA fans, thought UCLA was going to win the game. Given the way no one could get a stop, DTR inexplicably throws an interception to Corey Foreman at the 50-yard line with a minute and a half to go. Kaz Allen was wide open in the flat. That was at least a 20-25-yard play, and UCLA would have set up for a go-ahead score and a win there. That's play number 2. Okay, Coach. Play number 3. Remember last year, the Arizona game, if you recall. What a wild ending that was. That botched field goal before end of regulation. Everybody stunned that we're in overtime. First overtime, we score, but everyone's still sort of rattled. Noah Fifita, first play of Arizona's possession in overtime, if you recall, hits Jacob Cowing for a touchdown in 25 yards. Boom, easiest touchdown in the world. Cowing had 10 catches, 88 yards, 4 touchdowns in that game. The whole stadium, Coach, if you recall, thought Arizona was going to go for 2 because they had all the momentum. For whatever reason, Fish decides to kick the extra point. It resettles SC. They get the win. Arizona goes for 2. Cowing had 88 yards on 10 catches, was dominating short yardage. Arizona wins that game. A couple weeks later, remember the Cal game, Coach? Up 50-49, in that back and forth affair. Cal goes for 2 in the win. Gentry gets a fingertip on the 2-point play. Gentry doesn't get a fingertip on that play. We lose that game 51-50. This year, look at the LSU game. We talked about it at length. Obviously, we ended up winning that game. Less than 2 minutes to go. LSU's got the ball, USC 14-yard line, down 20-17. Nussmeier makes the wrong read. We had lost gap contain on the edge. If he hands the ball off to Emory Jr. Walks in for a touchdown. They're up 24-20 with 1:50 to go. And the way we've played this season down with less than 2 minutes, we're 0-4 in that situation. That's a loss. Big difference between marching down the field tied 20-20 and being down 24-20 in that situation. That's the Nussmeier misread is play number 5. And then finally play number 6 is Wisconsin muffing the punt at the start of the third quarter up 21-10. They don't muff that punt. The game's still on their schedule. They can grind it out. They can win a game. So 6 plays, 2 from 2022, 2 from 2023, 2 from 2024 that go the other way. Lincoln Riley's 16-18 at USC. So this thing can go both ways. That's why it's very dangerous to play this one play away type of philosophy, because college football is very different, Coach, than corporate America, than a Hollywood film, than even a political campaign. You don't get credit for percentages or proportions or gradients. It either is or it isn't. It's very clear. You either win or you lose, and this is a game that is played at the margins. And so ultimately, over the course of a season, you're going to get your fair share of good breaks and bad breaks, and the law of averages is going to play out, and it's all going to even out. At the end of the day, USC is 3-4 this season, and Lincoln Riley is 22-12 overall. No better, no worse, no closer, no further. It just is what it is, and quite simply, it's not good enough.
It's definitely not good enough, and we can always ask the question, where do we go from here, right? But I'm tired of asking that question. You know what I mean? And I remember, and I might be the person, I'll say it, I might be the person that jinxed him. Like, after the Michigan game, I'm like, we're kind of in a place where, like, uh-oh, not this again. And all of a sudden, we are in that place, uh-oh, not this again. Like, 3 years of no changes. What's so scary? You know what I mean? Like, you're not fixing it. And the fact that you don't fix it is the part that's just like, oh, my God, like, it's the same thing. Let's go back to the Penn State game and just flats wide open. That's the same thing with Alex Grinch. The running back walks right in the end zone. Nobody decides to cover him. Whenever the game is on the line, it's like, doesn't even matter. Defense completely disappears. We get the same results, right? It's so hard, and I have to accept the reality of it. And you know me, I've been trying to find every situation to get rid of him. I'm trying to spin every twist, trying to go every turn to get rid of him, but we can't get rid of him. We may be stuck with him for another 4 years. Just to soften the blow. And I came to a realization of that this morning, driving to work. Like, we may be stuck with Lincoln Riley for another 4 years, give him $30 million and send him on his way. We honestly may be, and this may be what it is for the next 4 years. Now, I will say this. I do have faith, and I do think we still have a chance, because Miami's drought has been longer than ours. Miami's drought has been since 2000, since Andre Johnson beat Eric Crouch in the national championship. They haven't been good since then. And now they're making the turn. So I still have faith. And I still think it could come back. But it's so hard, because I think we're going to be in a situation where we have a revolving door. And, I mean, you know what it's like. UCLA is going to be in a situation where a revolving door. And when you have a revolving door, you just can't win. Look at Texas. They had a revolving door. And they finally just like, all right, we need to invest in a guy. It scares me, because Ryan admitted the other day, he has a source saying the big donors just don't care about football anymore because it's not appropriate. Like, we're in a bad situation for us to be a blue blood school. Right.
Yeah, Coach. Absolutely. And I think the hope here moving forward is, I think you're absolutely right. And, we've covered this, extensively. And that is, obviously, given the financial considerations here, he's definitely got the end of this year. He's definitely got next year, barring an absolute collapse. Right. I mean, barring a 4-8 finish, he's got next year, and he's probably got the year after financially. So he's probably, football wise, it should be 25 should be the make it or break it year. Financially, though, he probably goes to 26 and maybe even 27, depending on what the buyout number is at that point. So what can he do from here moving forward? I mean, what are his strengths, Coach? And I know we'll get to this in the next segment. Quarterback, there's some conversation this week. What's going on with the quarterback and some interesting kind of tidbits of how USC is approaching this week a little bit differently. That's getting speculation up is number one. And then number two, you're hoping that the recruiting that has taken place, particularly in the trenches with Eric Henderson and particularly on the offensive line side, comes through. And if that can kind of come to fruition and USC elevates in the trenches and finds a quarterback, can Lincoln sort of salvage this over the course of 25 and 26? I think those are sort of the two levers here that you got. And the question, of course, is, can you find that right quarterback? And we may have someone kind of standing in the wings that could be the next one. And then B, are those recruits in the trenches going to still find this place attractive enough if this is sort of a 5-loss season, 6-loss season, and then next year you sort of get off to a slow start? Because these kids are just so young and the memories are so short, and we're in such a world of instant gratification with NIL and big sponsorships that there is no patience anymore. So you're either winning or you're not. Again, you're not, you can't sort of sell, we're a few plays away to these recruits. So that becomes the big question is can you sort of sell the story well enough to sort of keep your big recruits in the trenches? And do you have a quarterback that you can really sort of stand behind and build around? Not saying that Miller Moss isn't that guy. I still think he's a terrific quarterback, but for whatever reason, Lincoln is just not developing him in the same way that he has gotten credit for in years past with some other quarterbacks.
It makes you question, is it scheme or is it athletic ability? Because when you really look at it, none of them are really how do I put it? None of them are Hall of Famers in the NFL. You know what I mean? They struggle when they have to switch over the scheme. Look at Baker tonight. Baker's doing 2 bad picks already. Jalen Hurts is starting to struggle. Spencer Rattler, we saw what he did last week. Caleb is starting to come in his stride now, so we're looking at Caleb Williams coming in stride. I'm missing one more, right? There's 5.
Kyler.
Oh, well, we know Kyler is. Kyler was even at Oklahoma. I was never a fan of Kyler. I think his athletic ability makes him who he is, and when he slows down, he won't be any good. So,
well, Coach, I mean, it's an interesting point. That's why this quarterback decision that he's got, and we'll, I think, jump into it.
Go ahead, roll into it. Yeah, we can roll into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think this quarterback decision now that Lincoln is faced with is a very interesting one and a big inflection point in his career, because depending on whether you continue with Miller Moss or you switch to Maiava, this is a decision now that impacts the rest of 2024, but really sets up 2025, which to me is still a football make it or break it for Lincoln Riley for a couple of reasons. One is, we've talked at length about how I feel about year 4 as being the true sample size of whether or not you're an elite coach at an elite program in college football. But here's the other thing, and you touched upon this, Coach. He has this cachet right now about how many quarterbacks he can bring to the league and how many quarterbacks that he has as starting quarterbacks in the National Football League. But that window of cachet doesn't last forever. And I foresee a scenario that by 2026, just the nature of the NFL and the nature of how quickly things move, and guys are MVP candidates, and within 18 months, they're not starting anymore. And that's just the nature of the NFL. I see a world that by 2026, Coach, is not out of the realm of possibility that Baker or Kyler or Jaylin or Spencer, none of those guys are starting quarterbacks anymore. Like, he may only have one starting quarterback in the NFL by 2026, and all of a sudden, now the quarterback guru is no longer quite the quarterback guru. We've always had quarterback gurus, Coach, over the course of the history of college football, dating all the way back to Norm Chow at BYU. I mean, when you think about BYU and Steve Young and Walsh and McMahon, I mean, that was a whole kind of QBU, the QB whisper. You go to the 90s, and you see, what Spurrier was doing at Florida. He was considered the quarterback guru in the 90s. And then you sort of go to the 2000s and beyond. And then, obviously Lincoln in the 2010s. There's always been quarterback gurus, guys that have kind of gotten hot with momentum in terms of prospect over prospect when it comes to the quarterback position, but it doesn't last forever. And so that's why you need to keep generating results to infiltrate that pipeline and keep it healthy. Because by 2026, he may go from 5 starting quarterbacks to 1, and everyone will say, well, he was a great quarterback guru at one point. Is he still that guy anymore? And so that's why this decision this week, Coach, is pretty critical. And obviously, all the word out of USC today is Lincoln has closed off practices this week to the media. So media does not have their normal access to the team this week in a short week coming up against Rutgers. And there's speculation. Nothing has been confirmed, but the speculation for why is potentially making a quarterback change to Jayden Maiava against Rutgers, and he wants to sort of surprise attack Rutgers as a result of that. So we may be on the cusp here, Coach, of a quarterback change to Maiava, which would be very interesting. And, we talked about it a little bit on Saturday. Is this the right time to be able to do this? I personally thought, you wait until the bye, but, he's trying to change up the energy and the rhythm of this team to sort of build some momentum into next year. So we could be having our Maiava sighting on Friday in front of 11 people, Coach, because the vast majority of Los Angeles is going to be watching Game 1 of the World Series.
Yeah.
Unfortunate timing there. But Maiava could potentially be making his debut Friday night in the Coliseum at 8 p.m., Big Ten after dark.
So if then this is speculation. So if that is happening, I'm going to bring up your double-edged Trojan sword, right? And we know the positives that can happen, right? It can send a spark. You get a bunch of points. You see a bunch of Caleb Williams-type plays. You get the scrambling, all the stuff that everybody wants to see in a quarterback. But nobody's looking at the negative. This could completely tank a team, right? And then that's what I'm talking about when Lincoln Riley, he's killing his locker room right now. Let's just say it does happen, right? And then all of a sudden, you run into this thing to where, and I call it the Trojan quarterback curse. You play this one game, and then all of a sudden you're the man, and then all of a sudden they play Washington next, right? They play Washington after Rutgers, go to Seattle, and then he stinks it up in Seattle. Now you're stuck with a decision. Now you just split your whole locker room up. Just like that, you just split your whole locker room up. I get the bye because after the bye is Nebraska, UCLA, Notre Dame. We're going to find out pretty soon here if the season's off or not or anything like that in these next 2 games, right? We'll find out if they're going to be bowl eligible or not. But at the end of the day, you still have to maintain your locker room. Right. And there's things you could do to maintain your locker room. And I would say players are a little bit different now because back when we played, we were superstitious. We would have probably had a locker room lock in. We would have started burning things. We would have been rubbing chicken bones. We try to figure it out. I don't know if players still do that. But at the end of the day, if it doesn't work, you just completely killed your locker room. Are you willing to take a risk right now to put your locker room on the line? Because if your locker room is messed up in today's world, guess what happens? You're going to have a mass exodus and everybody's going to run to the portal. And there's some guys you just can't afford to lose to the portal because you see the growth. Makai Lemon, Jacoby Lane, you know what I mean? Even Deuce Robinson's coming in a stride. Some of those, Brennan Shelby, number 28, the linebacker, what is his name?
You mean 23, Stevens?
Stevens, yep. Yeah. He's coming in a stride. You don't want to lose those guys. Those are foundation guys that you want to keep. I don't like the risk. And I might be a little bit too conservative on it, but I know you have to change something up. But I feel like that's too big of a risk for me to make the change right now. And now you're speculating. Now, just hear me out, man. I'll pass it to you after this. Now you have people speculating. Oh, they're making a quarterback change. Then you got the grimy reporters. Hey, who's starting quarterback this year? Players got to keep quiet. And they're lucky their walk is shorter because we used to have to walk all the way down in front of locker to get to the locker room. Now they can just cross the street and go straight to the locker room, so they're a little bit lucky. But now you're speculating. So what if articles start coming out and people start seeing it? You can't completely silence the outside noise. Are you willing to risk your locker room to make this change? That's the question.
Yeah, Coach. I mean, it's a really great question. Very interesting. I mean, I think you have to sort of look at it from a risk-reward, cost-benefit analysis, perspective. And I think that's what you're suggesting here. Look, from a cost-benefit standpoint, I don't know if there is a ton of downside. Now, I think here's the thing. We don't know if Maiava is the answer or not. So We're not suggesting that Maiava is better than Miller-Moss or he's the answer and Moss isn't. I think the one thing we do know is Maiava is physically more gifted than Miller-Moss, and that's something that we even said in the offseason, right? He's a better athlete. He's got a bigger arm. He's just more physically gifted. But there's tons of guys who are physically gifted. That doesn't mean you know how to play the quarterback position. So let's put that aside. But let's just look at it from a cost-benefit standpoint. There really isn't any downside. To me, if you're Lincoln Riley and you're making $10 million a year, it's playoff or bust. I mean, frankly, if they go at this stage 8-4, 7-5, 6-6, to me, there's really no difference in those records, right? I mean, 8-4, 7-5, 6-6 is all 6 of one, half a dozen of the other in my mind. So you're not necessarily playing for wins in the same way of, there's momentum that's going to be built if we get X number of wins. I think the momentum for next year is kind of crushed. The way you sort of get momentum is the way you had momentum last year in the Holiday Bowl, where even though it was a catastrophic season, because of the way Miller-Moss played in the Holiday Bowl, look at all the momentum that was accrued in the offseason and the hope for this particular season. So that's how you sort of generate that momentum. Number two, in terms of the locker room, coach, I hear you, and I think it's a great point. But this is also a very senior-laden team. I mean, when you think about Clifton and Meyer and Jamil Muhammad and Cobb, Mascarenas Arnold, Achille Arnold, Jaylin Smith, Jacoby Covington, Greedy Vance. I mean, all of these guys are seniors on the offensive side of the ball. Monheim, Pregnon, Woody Marks, all of these guys are seniors. So, there's going to be sort of a locker room turnover next year anyway. So if you're sort of losing seniors, it's never pleasant, but it's not like there's sort of a carryover effect into next year either, right? I mean, I think at this stage, given where Shelby is and where Stevens is and where Tompkins is and where Fountain is and Albasari is, I think they're just really excited to play and get reps. I don't know if they've sort of elevated to sort of team leader status quite yet, where kind of the culture of the team is more their responsibility. They're still the younger guys. They still need to prove themselves that they're viable pieces of this sort of longer-term foundation. So I think they're just excited to play. And then I think from a wide receiver perspective, Coach, I think all of these guys, between Branch, Robinson, Lane, and Lemon, whether it's Moss or not, look, the leading receiver on the team right now, Coach, has 303 yards receiving through 7 games. Okay, so the leading receiver is averaging 44 yards receiving per game. Okay, so whether it's either quarterback, these guys are all going to have to sit there and make a decision and say, hey, is 44 yards per game enough over the next year or two to get me to the NFL? And if it is, I'll stick it out. If it's not, it would not surprise me if one or more of that quartet goes in the transfer portal, regardless of who the quarterback is, just because of opportunity. You want to sort of set yourself up. Those are very talented players, Coach. They want, I think, more of a platform to be able to showcase. So I think the combination of how you build momentum next year with the fact that you're very senior laden in a lot of key positions, with the fact that you're already kind of deep in some positions where the transfer portal is going to happen regardless, I'm not sure there's a ton of downside. From a programmatic standpoint, to go to Maiava. There's really no harm, because if you play him and he blows up, you have your quarterback for 2025. If you play him and he doesn't, he sort of flattens out, now that you got to go into the portal in the offseason and go get somebody else. Who's going to be this year's version of Will Howard? Who's going to be this year's version of Cam Ward? Who do you have to go bring in from a quarterback competition standpoint with these guys, with Juju, and really say who's going to be my quarterback next year? The person that you really feel for here, Coach, not necessarily from a programmatic standpoint, is Miller-Moss himself. True Trojan, waited his turn, did all the right things. And the nice thing is no one is ever going to be able to take away that Holiday Bowl MVP performance from him. No one's ever going to be able to take away that LSU win from him, USC's first top 15 win since 2017. But unfortunately, he is sitting as 4-4 at a starter. And, this is yet another story. If this is the end of the Moss era at USC, it's sad that these fairy tale debuts don't always have the happy endings, right, Coach? We look at JT Daniels, how he blew up his first start with Amon-Ra, the two modern-day guys in 2018. We saw how Slovis blew up. You remember in the Stanford game, coach, of 2019? We thought he was the truth, and it flattened out. And then Jackson Dart, if you recall, remember coming in for Slovis against Washington State, going crazy. We thought he was the answer, and he flattened out. So it would be sad if the Moss career sort of follows that trajectory a little bit. So I feel for Miller more than anybody else. But I think from a programmatic standpoint, coach, I'm not sure there's a downside.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna agree to disagree because we could get in deep to this because just 3,000-foot view. Those seniors could spread cancer. That cancer could stay, and it could kill your locker room for years to come. It'll take forever to get it out. That's the only thing I'm worried about. Just real quick to summarize. That's the only thing. I know you've been simulating, but like it can. But you're right. I mean, you got it. You need a spark, and if that's the way they feel that it worked with Caleb Williams, right? Oklahoma needed a spark. They had to take Rattler out, and maybe this is what's needed, right? So we'll see. I think you're right. I do feel bad for Miller Moss, but I think, especially after talking to my buddy, I think he has a shot at the NFL, and they say that he's like a high too, but we'll see what happens after workouts and everything like that. That's just right now. He needs some time to sit. He just doesn't have enough starts, but I think he was great. I think he did really good.
I do too, Coach. I really do too. And I think, so much of the conversation right now is today about even the run-pass mix between Lincoln Riley. Coach, right now, SC this season is averaging 42 passes a game to 27 runs per game. So 42 passes is 7th in the country. 27 runs a game is 129th in the country. Okay. And so you see that split. It's 61% throw, 39% run. And, his offenses at Oklahoma and earlier were a lot more balanced than what they are this year. And it's not because, and here's the interesting thing. This is because of Lincoln Riley. And people are pointing to the fact that Miller Moss isn't sort of the athlete that Caleb Williams is, or Kyler was, or Jalen Hurts was, or even Baker was. And that may be all true. But he's not throwing more because he can't run. I mean, Woody Marks has put together a series of 100-yard games. This team has been able to run the ball, particularly in between the tackles, very effortlessly. You got a second running back in Joyner, who's a bruiser, who knows how to get yards. So it's not like they're throwing so much because they can't run. Despite Miller Moss's whatever limitations you want to call them from an athleticism standpoint, this team is still able to run the ball. This is really about Lincoln Riley's play mix himself. This is sort of self-inflicted. So I think Miller's actually done a phenomenal job this year. Now, having said that, he has gotten lazier with his footwork. He has gotten sloppier with his mechanics. There has been sort of an overall regression from a consistency standpoint since the start of the season, particularly in that LSU game to now. And that's a bit concerning. And then, of course, the turnovers. The interceptions have really been kind of crushing at some key moments. So, there's been a lot of good in terms of reading defenses. There's been some bad, but part of this, Coach, and we've talked about it, is, how many of those interceptions were his fault given the line? How many of those interceptions were his fault given the play calling and putting too much on him over the course of the second half of a ball game? So, it's tough. I mean, has he gotten an A+ this year in terms of performance? No. But has he been an F or a D this year? No. I think Miller Moss has been kind of a B- grade. I would give Miller Moss B- to C+ over the course of this season. So there's certainly room from a B- to sort of improve. But then there's also an argument to say, hey, look, season's over. Let's see what we got with Maiava over a 4 or 5 game stretch and potentially have a really meaningful quarterback competition. And the other thing, Coach, is, would it be interesting if Maiava wins this competition? Do we see Miller Moss at the transfer portal? I mean, it just this is sort of the nature of the beast that we're in right now. With college football today. So interesting mix here. But I'm much higher on Miller Moss than most of, the followers of the team. And I know you are as well. And I know Ryan is as well. I think he's been a phenomenal quarterback. He's had some mistakes. It's only 8 career starts. There's really room to grow here for Miller Moss. But unfortunately, circumstances and timing may get the better of his tenure at USC.
Yeah, I think, I'm looking at stats right now. He's 14 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, but he's 6 yards away from throwing for 2,000 yards. You know what I mean? Like he's 183 for 284, which isn't terrible. It is what it is, though. At the end of the day, I mean,
We're
not the coaches. We're just some guys on a podcast.
Right. No, at the end of the day, look, I mean, I think, has he done enough to completely secure the job? No. Has he done to completely blow the job? No. But when you're somewhere in between and you're 3 and 4, you might as well see what else you have, going into 25.
Yep, definitely. I mean, if in that case too, start playing all the young guys.
Well, that's what I was saying. That's what I was saying on Saturday, Coach.
If you're gonna lose with young guys. Get them the experience. Get them out there ready to play, and rep them up. If you're gonna lose with young guys.
Coach, the season was over. Let's be honest. I mean, after the Penn State, the moment that ball went through the uprights in overtime from the Penn State kicker, the season was over. This is now a glorified preseason for 2025. So, you have to kind of help guys, the upperclassmen kind of get set up for the NFL. Do they have enough on film or they don't? You want to sort of set them up for success. And then you got to play the young guys. I feel like you got to play all the young guys after the bye. I think there's a really nice, clean inflection point. But if you want to do it sooner, certainly that's Lincoln Riley's prerogative. And we'll see if he sort of leans more into that direction, obviously starting with the quarterback on Friday night.